Hello readers, I'm the Avid reader. So I've read and reviewed many geopolitics books on this YouTube channel, over 20 now. So today I thought I would talk about 5 geopolitics books which I definitely think you should read. And this was not an easy list to make, but I think I found the 5 most essential reads. So the first geopolitics book you should definitely start with is Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. This is an introduction to geopolitics, where you have Tim Marshall breaking down the importance of geography in international relations and how countries develop and evolve. So there are chapters on the United States, China, Russia, Europe, India, Pakistan, Japan, Korea, Africa, and Latin America. And here you get a basic understanding of why countries are the way they are. And Tim Marshall argues that the main factor is geography. And he does not go into depth that much on any one particular region or country. The one he goes most in depth on is the Middle East, but you learn a lot of things, and it's definitely the first geopolitics books I would recommend you to read first. It's actually the first geopolitics book I read myself, although I read it in Swedish. The next book I think you should read is The Tragedy of Great Power Politics by John Mearsheimer. Now, Mearsheimer is an offensive realist, so I disagree a lot with him, but if you want to understand balance of power dynamics and power politics in international relations, then there's no better place to start than The Tragedy of Great Power Politics. You get to understand how bipolar, unipolar, multipolar systems work and different strategies that states use to maintain their security, such as buck passing, balancing, bandwagoning. And in this book it's also emphasized that the most important aspect of a country is its military power, specifically the army. The Air Force and Navy, according to Mearsheimer, are just ancillary means of securing your power, but the most important is the army. The next geopolitics book I think you should read is Asia's Cauldron by Robert Kaplan, and this is my favorite geopolitics books actually. And this is about the South China Sea and the different countries within it and their competing interests and how the different countries here have developed over the years. So Kaplan talks a lot about Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam, and there's an emphasis here that the important military branch in the South China Sea is the Navy, not the Army, and that to prevent China establishing hegemony here, you need the Americans organizing an alliance against them to balance them. So there's an emphasis in this book of the United States being in the region to maintain a balance of power, to defend the national interests of smaller countries like Vietnam or the Philippines. So if you want to read one book about geopolitics in East Asia, this is a good start, Asia's Cauldron. Next up, you have The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington, and this is a very different approach to geopolitics, a civilizational approach, where you have competing civilizations. You have the West, you have the Cynic civilization, you have the Islamic civilization, and you have the Russian or Orthodox Christian civilization. Those are the main civilizations competing, although you have smaller ones like Buddhist civilization, Hindu civilization, Latin American civilization, and Japanese civilization. And Huntington believes that this is the best approach for a post-Cold War era. And there's an important emphasis here that you have the West that is clashing with the Islamic civilization and the Cynic civilization. So you have the democratic, based on equality West, you have the more hierarchical Cynic civilization, and then you have the fact that the Islamic civilization is very violent towards other civilizations. So if you look at a lot of conflicts today, it's basically Muslims fighting against other groups or between each other. Most civilizations don't come into military conflict that much, but the Islamic civilization basically goes into military conflict with everyone, whether it be with the Orthodox civilization in Tajikistan, whether it be with the Christian civilization in the Philippines. So a very interesting alternative way to view geopolitics. So it's definitely worth to read The Clash of Civilizations by Huntington. And the final and fifth book I'm gonna talk about is The Accidental Superpower by Peter Zehan. And this book basically talks about that the geography of the United States is going to guarantee it to prosper, and that they're gonna withdraw from guaranteeing international trade and security, and that this withdrawal will cause chaos in the world and that you will have many wars. And this book, which came out in 2014, successfully predicted that Ukraine and Russia would go to war around the 2020s or so. This book also talks about the weakness of the Russian and Chinese states because of the demographic problems they have. The USA will care about very few countries in the end, according to this book's argument. So they'll care about a lot of countries in Latin America, a few countries in Asia, and a few countries in Europe. And this book is important to read because even if the scenario of chaos is maybe a bit over-exaggerated, it's still important to understand the importance of the US Navy in guaranteeing free trade and international security, because if the USA stops being the guarantor of peace and trade, then you will have probably a lot more wars. So those are the 5 geopolitics books I think you should read. Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics by John Mersheimer, Asia's Cauldron by Robert Kaplan, The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington, and The Accidental Superpower by Peter Zihan. Start with these 5 geopolitics books if you're interested in this subject. Anyways, I'm the Avid Reader, and I will see you readers next time.